Right. Hello, everybody. This is the first episode of the Switchers podcast with Francisco de Abreu Duarte. Today, we're going to be speaking with a person who went from a legal scholar to legal tech innovator. And we're going to be speaking about his journey. Francisco is now a CEO at Lexstream. He's a PhD in law. He's a former EU policy advisor and academic, and we'll talk about all this background and how he decided to switch in the next up to 1 hour, maybe 30 to 40 minutes. I think it's going to be exciting for everybody who is considering to switch their careers or just switched and maybe seeks for some inspiration and advice. And I'm your host, Dima. I have a legal background myself, worked for a couple of years in multinationals, but also in a law firm, then switched to running startup accelerator, and then switched to running innovation company and investment company. So I definitely feel you, people who are switching careers, who would like to change something in their life and who are seeking some advice even. Hello, Francisco. How are you?
Hi, Damon. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. So, Francisco, can you tell a little bit more? What do you do now before we jump into the details and before I rewind your career back?
Sure, Damon. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations once again on the podcast. So currently, I am the CEO of a legal ad tech called Lexstream. And what we're trying to do is quite simple. We are trying to transform how legal knowledge is conveyed. And we're doing that departing from the premise that people are less connected to the reading format as they used to be, as you and me were not so long ago. And they want to enjoy legal knowledge in different ways, in different formats. So we're exploring mostly video and audio as alternatives. We're using a mix between Gen AI. So we do use some foundational models for part of the projects we do, but we continue to have a strong human component. So on the instructional design part, on how we structure the projects, we haven't completely transferred our knowledge team to AI. And so far, we are mostly dealing with universities and law firms as our major clients. We're mostly B2B oriented at this point. Now, the big step in this year, the next 6 months, will be we're launching a B2C product in which mostly academics will be able to transform their knowledge from written format into both video and audio in a very sort of streamlined process. So far, it's going great. It's definitely a different life, but one that I'm enjoying quite a lot.
Nice. And before you're gonna tell us about the life that you're enjoying, please tell us the roots, your roots in law. How did you start? How did you pursue your career? Maybe a little bit also about the academic journey that you had.
Yeah. So I still consider myself a professor and a legal scholar. I don't think that the fact that you switch to doing something in a startup world or in a sort of investment environment necessarily removes that part. We both continue to teach and we have this sort of love for teaching and researching. But I think that there is a moment in your career, and I felt that I think halfway through my PhD, where at least personally for me, it did not feel like scholarship was enough. There were a couple of reasons for that. I think the main reason, so the switch occurred mostly because I felt at some point that what I was writing about, what I was discussing in conferences and classical settings, was not really transferring into the real world. There were two or three moments where that was very clear that I was surrounded by a group of colleagues and I was enjoying quite a lot of discussions I was having and all of that. But at some point, I felt this is a private club. We are all very interested in these topics. But whatever is happening in Silicon Valley with big tech companies is largely unaffected by anything we say here. And up until that moment, I was a hardcore scholar type, right? So I graduated from Lisbon as a lawyer. I struggled to become really good student. And straight after law school, I was invited, something we do in Portugal, I was invited to be what is called an assistant lecturer. So you're very young, age 22, age 23. and you were put in front of quite a large number of students, around 90 students. And you do really the bulk of the work, not just, so the big professors, they will do the lectures, they will teach, but then the sort of day-to-day evaluation and most of the sort of hard teaching is done by this. Now I look as kids, right? But at the time I felt it was a very noble profession to have at that time. And I liked it quite a lot. I loved teaching. I fell in love with the moment of conveying the knowledge. And then at some point in Lisbon, I felt I needed to have an international experience. I come from a conservative university, the University of Lisbon. They're very good at the substantive level, not as good as sort of opening your horizons. And so from there, I went to NYU, where I did my LLM there, and I worked with Joseph Weiler, this famous legal scholar. He was my master supervisor there. And he was, I think, the one that kind of first led me to think that you did not have to be one specific type of lawyer. And that's one thing that he keeps saying today, is that there's many different ways of being a legal scholar, being a legal professor, being a researcher, and you don't have to do the Portuguese, German, continental way to be a good scholar. And I kept that very close to my heart. You need to know the rules, right? You need to be a German, Portuguese, good scholar in that sense, but you need to go beyond that. And then I think it's something, I don't know about your experience, Dima, but I always thought that Americans did very well, North American scholars, is that they were able to teach in a way that you just were dazzled by the format and the show. And
Yes.
I didn't have really that kind of performative type of teaching in Lisbon. So I went there and was just like, wow, there's a different way of doing things. At some point, I also felt that to a large extent, there was too much at some point. When I had purely US scholars teaching me, I thought, oh my God, this is almost a sort of a theater show part of it. So I think I kept my core continental law scholar ideas. I studied the law very hard. I need to know the substance of it before I open. But then I learned how to open a bit more. And that's where I think the switch started. Like it started to erode somehow, this idea that you just have to be from 18 to 65 in your Lisbon University teaching design.
Yeah. And yeah, that's amazing that you started already talking about the experience. I definitely recall on the performative style of US teachers. I've been also doing my LLM in the Netherlands, and we had a person who was teaching securities law, and she was a professor from the US, and indeed it was a very different style. But what I'm curious about is maybe you remember a day or a moment or a setting where you understood that, okay, maybe I should be moving towards just being a scholar to creating something better in a different way, or this is not the way it should be. When did you have this click moments when you said, okay, I need to fix
So
this?
I think it was during my PhD probably. So from NYU, I then went to Brussels, became a policy advisor, and then straight after I went to start my PhD in Florence at the UI, which is a place that I still feel it's somehow in between the European continental tradition and the US tradition. We had lots of US scholars, even as part of the faculty. But there was a moment there, you spend a lot of time alone during a PhD, you overthink everything. At some point, you need to start thinking about other things to even escape your own reality. Otherwise, you risk going mad just thinking about the project. And there were, I think, two moments there. We had these working groups that still happen today, where you invite some scholar from outside of the UI and he or she sits down with a group of researchers, and then you are supposed to have a very horizontal discussion with it. And I'm not going to say who he was, but we did invite a very renowned scholar. And the way he presented the topic and the way we reacted to it made me feel that we had changed nothing in the way that scholarship was done. He started by saying, thank you everyone for the invitation. I will speak for 10 minutes. My name is blah, blah, blah. And then he presented slides that looked from, I don't know how many years ago. And then that stopped. And then, does anyone have questions? That we had 3 minutes of questions, very quick. And there was it. And I was thinking, what my God, I spent 2 years and we're still doing the same format that, a Roman lawyer would do 2000 years ago. And I remember just thinking there must be another way, Because if I am not super comfortable with the situation, when I go back to becoming a professor or a teacher, and my students that are probably born in 2010 or 2005 or 6, they will not relate to this. There is no way that anyone will relate to this format. And that for me was a bit of a crisis, Dima, because I don't know about you, but it was really up until I would say, 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I was really convinced that had been born to become a professor, to become a scholar. And that was my mission. That was and then I got disappointed at some point, I think, with legal scholarship, how it worked. So I think that was the first moment. Then there is a moment, there is a difficult moment, which is when you finish the PhD, there's plenty of positions out there for postdocs, and you're supposed to carry on continuously. You do a postdoc, then maybe you do a second postdoc. At some point, I know colleagues who have 3 postdocs. It's a never-ending postdoc mania. And then you're supposed to then apply for these positions to become an assistant professor. And what I felt was that many of my colleagues who were 40-something, so they were in the second stage of their careers after what I was about to begin, they were suffering still so much with funding problems. Most of them were paid by themselves and the projects they would bring back to academia. Universities themselves were struggling to produce scholarship that was interesting enough for their financial sustainability. At some point, you have to have an LLM to be sustainable. So there were so many other dimensions of academic work that had nothing to do with teaching, that I think when I combine the things, that we're still very old-fashioned the way we do things. And then if you actually want to change things, it will take you 20 years within the system to do. And I said, I need to try and see if there's other ways that we can, together with universities, side by side, not replacing them, but by side with them, try to inject a bit of modernity into it. And then I found people that helped me to do this within academia. And then I started to understand that every time I spoke about these issues, there were a very selected number of people that would come up to me and say, Francisco, yeah, you're right. I cannot say anything because I'm inside the system and can affect my career. So there's many people wanting to change. I felt that there was no vehicle for that. And now hopefully what I'm doing now in collaboration with them and in cooperation with them is to do a bit of that.
Yep, I totally understand. And I was wondering, how did you come up with the idea to do the startup, the edtech startup that you're doing now? How did you realize that I should do this specific product for this specific people? This is the format. And the next question going to be about entrepreneurship and different roles, different hats that you have. But I'm curious, how did you came up with the
So
idea?
you're working behind the scenes of everything. So you know that there is no such thing as a sort of, I woke up one day and looked at the sky and Lexstream. That it's just, at least my experience, that is never the case. So with me, it was definitely not the case. Lexstream was born as a different project, very niche project, which was to create a very small intermediary system, a platform that could connect legal scholars to actual law firms that require their legal opinions. So mostly in continental law, there is this thing of asking academics to write sort of legal opinions, sometimes costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what we felt at the time was that there was no company in between. So it was, I'm a law firm, I need a certain legal opinion. Who is the best professor in Ukrainian law or Portuguese law on this topic? And so we decided to develop, and that's where I also started coding, and we started to develop something called Opinio, which that was the idea, would submit a request and then we would find the scholars that were responsible for that. We very quickly understood that there was no product market fit for that at all for a bunch of reasons. But the first one being that the leading professors were the ones getting a disproportionate number of requests. The market was, so there is a market opportunity, but there is a sort of gatekeeper problem where if you want to open up, the big guys will tell you that's not a good idea. And they will tell their clients that's not a good idea. And suddenly you're not able to price, a guy that is 10 years or 15 years into the career, his opinion will be nothing until he reaches his 50th anniversary or 60th anniversary, and he's a full-blown scholar that can write. So we, to a certain extent, failed there, right? So we understood there was not quite a lot. But because of that, we started working with one law firm, which was our first client. And that client started to give us very specific feedback on the things that they needed. And what they needed was better knowledge. They were sick and tired of PowerPoint presentations. They were sick and tired of inviting these people to have conferences in their law firm that served no purpose. And so we started in a very artisanal way to do Zoom recordings of academics teaching on topics that we knew matter to the law firms. And we grew like this, bootstrapped, no investment, no rounds, law firm by law firm. What do you need? Oh, I want a scholar that teaches us about open banking. Okay, let's find the scholar in our network that did that. That at some point led us to understand that scholars were not very good performers themselves. So that was also a harsh truth, but the truth nonetheless, which was if I would go with a camera and record the average academic, the average scholar, he or she would become intimidated, extremely intimidated, and they would not perform well. And so the output that we would then give to the law firms was many times a bit weird. And that was the feedback we got from the clients. The knowledge is great. I love what he or she is saying, but I absolutely hate the way that it's being said. Again, these were European scholars most of the time. Maybe Americans have been better, but European scholars, you could not get the attitudes to. And this is where we started working with avatarization processes. At the time, there was the beginning of really, this is before OpenAI, this is before foundational model. The first people were trying to work deepfake technology in a way that was used for good and not in a way that was used for malicious stuff. And so we started playing around a bit with models that could recreate these guys' face in order to avoid actually recording them and having the weird. And so we ran a few tests, and those few tests were actually very successful. People preferred the avatarization versions, the avatar versions, than the actual academic speaking. Because of many, not just the academic, but they would record in terrible places and the sound was not great. And so we started to understand that there was a business opportunity here in transmitting knowledge in different ways. And then slowly but steadily, we started asking more and more academics, including very high-level academics, to do these kind of classes for us. And then we got the really super generous support of Miguel Pérez Maduro's, the former Ask a Channel from Portugal. And we looked at the project. He said, I want my avatar. I want to translate some of my written work into classes. And it turned out amazing. He's a very speaker in the best way possible. And things started to shine. And then we would show the law firms and they were, I cannot believe that that's not him. This is great. Can you do this class for him? Can you do? And this is how we actually grew at the B2B level. And what we want to do now in the next 6 months is to open up what is our experience at the B2B level, which is a good but contained experience, to the B2C level. Because what I don't see why we would not have Dima and your great course on startup law. Maybe you could have a short version that people from all around the world in a multi-language setting could enjoy, which does not mean that Dima, the true Dima, is not the most essential part of the course. But maybe the avatar Dima can speak to larger audiences at shorter versions that then the true Dima as workshops works on what matters to be human, right? Not just you're repeating things every year the same. No, that is for avatar Dima. The true Dima goes there, does workshops, builds startup ideas with the students. And yeah, that was it. So that was a sort of the transfer from, I think, a terrible idea at the beginning, or perhaps not a great idea, to what we now know it's a product market fit that works. And we are now probably going to raise capital to boost the project because the project is frankly going well.
Yeah. Amazing. I really like your approach, which is just talking to your customers. I think this is the best approach, right? Do something that maybe you're not so proud of or actually embarrassed. Some famous investors said that if you're launching and you're not embarrassed of your product, then you're launching too late. So you should be launching, asking for a feedback, and then bit by bit changing it.
And people are supportive, Dima. So this is another thing that a good bit of startup advice is that people are on the other side, when they see that you are a startup, there's 5 of you or 6 of you, They're generally supportive when they receive your product. They obviously cannot charge 50K per hour. That's a problem. But you tend to charge very little. And so they are willing to bet a bit on you as clients and to give you really feedback. Look, like Francisco, this is not working for us. What would be really nice was if we had this. And then you built your feature into the product, a feature that really matters for them, that many times is not your original idea. You think that they are going to love something. In my case, with the original thing was we thought that they would love 1 hour lectures. And they did not like 1 hour lectures. On the contrary, they really liked very small snippets because they wanted to consume 7 minutes now, 7 minutes after. And that's the way they would consume knowledge. And we were wrong completely. And so they said, stop with the stupidity of putting 1 hour lectures. No one is going to watch that. Divide it. That's how you grow, I think, listening more than doing.
Yeah, yeah. Totally get it. And since we're on the topic of getting paid 50K per hour, I think a lot of people who are going to be listening, they are also concerned about their financial state. So I was wondering, how did you approach this shift? Did it help you? How did you start working like a side hustle, let's say? How was the switch? How did it influence your personal financial stability? Maybe some advices that you would give yourself to do,
Yeah.
I don't know, 5 years
So I
ago.
think the first thing I would say, Dima, and you know this very well, it is brutally difficult. And there is no sugarcoating around it. It's the most difficult. And I've done a PhD, and that's considered to be a very difficult. It's 10 times, 100 times more difficult than that. It's mentally challenging. It's financially challenging. It's personally challenging. And I think we always hear the success cases, right? Mark Zuckerberg gets out of Harvard, and then boom, Facebook. Elon Musk drops college, boom, Tesla or PayPal. I think those guys would tell you, and they have telling many interviews like that before you get to that level, you have so many difficult obstacles. So the financial obstacle is a big one. So I was with a comfortable scholarship, and before that, I was working as a policy advisor, making a really nice living. And I've decided when we started a project that I would actually rent my house. I moved back with my dad for a while because that was the only way I could survive, was to rent the house I had in Lisbon, get that money to then invest in the early stages of the product. And you need to spend that money in the beginning because you want to have a product, you're going to fail, you want to hire a developer, or you want to hire a marketing advisor, something like that. You will need that money. So financially, it is extremely difficult. Unless you have absolutely rich parents or a VC fund is already so, it's your second or third company and they already believe you. But most cases I know, people are really struggling in the first year and a half, and most of them fail, right? We know that the death rate is very high. Now, what I think that helped me a bit was we were not adopting the classic sort of American VC mentality where we were going to raise 10 million and burn those 10 million in the first 2 years. We did not adopt this sort of new economic model that Amazon and some other companies have adopted. Because honestly, we did not think that the VC structure, I don't know if you agree, Dima, but that the continental Europe VC spirit was very conducive to that. The first thing in our first VC meetings we had was, how many clients do you have? How much money are you doing? What's your EBITDA? And 3 months in, you have nothing to show for. And even when you're a pre-seed, at least in Europe, these guys ask stupid questions, about what is your revenue? What do you expect to be in 2 months? How many millions are you doing in the next 6 months? And so we decided something a bit less ambitious. We said, we're going to create some business that is going to be and try to be profitable as quickly as possible. Not necessarily becoming the next unicorn, perhaps, but dropping the idea that startups live off injected capital, burn trades, and then a new wave of capital, burn trades, and you can endure like that for years on it. Because we adopted that mentality, we had to go and find clients quickly that paid for this. What that meant? It meant that we had to many times iterate our products to make money, right? So we have a certain strategy line, which we call the main strategy. where we want to go. And this is where every time we have more money, it goes there. But in the meantime, because we are not fueled by American classic capital, we have to do a lot of side projects that take you there, the side hustles that you were having, right? And so we did quite a lot of those, right? Things that people would ask us for marketing at some point. We did video production at some point. There was an interesting project at some point that we also had that required a big teaching dimension on AI tools. We did that as well. And so we were never embarrassed from straying a bit to the side, still using the same core competencies, education, Gen AI, but to do things that people would ask of us to make that extra money that we could then pocket and invest in the main strategy. But I know that when many of our colleagues ask us, should I sell my house? And you don't have to, but you do need to be okay with a certain level of discomfort for, I would say, at least 2 years of your life. You're going to see people become partners. You're going to see your colleague lawyers advance their lives, and you will feel like you're stuck in an idea that people don't believe in, that maybe at some point your family starts to doubt. There was a moment where my mom was also just, are you sure that this is a good idea? Because you don't see the results immediately. You have to build and build. And yeah, I think the financial dimension of that, you need to take a very serious look at yourself before you engage, before you switch, to see, am I comfortable? Do I have enough savings for the next 2 years to sustain this project with a percentage of things going wrong that probably is around 75 to 80%? If you're okay with that, and if you're okay with that discomfort, I think you're in the right track.
That's in the perfect world, I would say. But my personal experience is that you just start, because you cannot not start, right? You just start and you have these ideas and you have these discussions, and then it actually drives you. And yeah, in a perfect world scenario, of course, you should be very aware of your situation, especially if you're having family, for instance. I do myself now, and that's a different story. But what I wanted to ask is, do you remember the first time you had to do something completely outside of your comfort zone? Like you were switching from a career path that was very academic, very traditional, but now you have to hire people, I don't know, pitch. You mentioned you were pitching your startup, writing your first lines of code, etc. When was the moment when you were like, okay, this is something different and tough, and this is outside
Yeah,
of
well, there are many moments. I think the coding moment for sure. It's when I started learning coding, I was developing the first websites, and we did some website developing as well as one side hustle to funnel some cash into the company. And I did all of that part. At some point I was, well, what the hell are you doing, Francisco? You are a lawyer and a scholar, and then suddenly you're coding a website and you're learning how to deploy a website. And there's so many failures at that stage, right? You are so many hours of learning. And maybe I should have learned in a better way. That would be my advice for the 5-year-old Francisco 5 years ago, would be maybe you can take it a bit slower and learn first, and instead of just doing. But as you say, you just want to do so much. And so you crash. I constantly crashed against the wall of stupid coding. But why is this not working? And then you learn how to make it work. So the coding part for sure felt to me a bit outside of my expertise. Now, curiously, I now find most comfort in the tech parts that I do. And I find that I have mastered it so well. And it's something that it was so difficult to get there, that when I do it these days, I almost feel like, this is your little baby. Then there was another thing that really made me think, what the hell are you doing? You don't belong here, which was curiously video editing. The kind of thing that you will have to do them at some point with this podcast. I was trying to work very complex, Filmora style softwares and things like that. And the impact of one of those softwares in the beginning is just so overwhelming. You have just so many buttons and 1,000 screens. And I remember thinking, you're never going to be able to just transform this academic video that this guy just made for you and deliver it to the law firm that has asked it in a cool way, because you have no idea how to do any of this. And at that moment, we didn't have enough money even to hire a full-time video editor. So we would hire some freelancers. We actually had a really good freelancer at the time from Ukraine. This was before the war. and it helped us quite a lot. And it was a guy that was really saying, you can do this. I will teach you. It's not that difficult. It was a really guy. And it was from Fiverr, the classic thing that you probably, those guys probably will all be in a different place right now because of Gen AI. But at that time, there was a way to get people to do small gigs for you. But there is a moment, I think, that any entrepreneur looks at the learning curve and you start understanding that you're more and more comfortable with not knowing, and your learning speed it goes through the roof at some point. I always thought that learning was linear, but learning is definitely not linear. And when you start to add those layers of knowledge, you start to understand there were some things that I've learned in law in terms of reasoning that are exceptionally useful when you code Python, for example. The logic of things, it's compound knowledge. There was things that I did in law that were not just, I'm going to forget about this. They're actually extremely useful in the things I do today. Now, of course, I have a bigger team and I have people that actually help me with all the video editing. The most beautiful things about Lexstream is not me, is my wonderful team of designers and instructional designers that looked at it. But none of them would have been possible if I had not experienced the suffering of those first, I would say, from those first years and the discomfort that comes from that.
Yep. Yeah, learning to handle discomfort is a very existential and a very important part. And I do it for sports, through and during sports. That's another way. But what I was wondering about, you mentioned briefly that there were a lot of things that you learned as a lawyer that were useful in other skills or in different ways that you were working. Can you mention a few of them? What did you help being a lawyer and you use the skills into the new
So there is one that is perhaps the most evident on my day-to-day life, which is the pitching capacity, right? As a lawyer, especially if you're a legal scholar and you've been teaching for some years, and I've been teaching now for really almost a decade, you start to understand what are the best ways to convey a certain message. And that message can be what happened on case XYZ. It can be what is the meaning of the Digital Services Act, but it can also be, if you modulate and if you iterate well enough, why is Lexstream the biggest and most relevant company to solve that problem? It's generally speech, it's language. And so if you are able to find the sweet spots that each of the audiences wants to hear, that kind of training is the most relevant training that I had throughout. Convincing a student that you're saying the right thing, convincing a professor at some point that you are arguing a PhD, teaching a VC. Those are different audiences, but the form, the way that you're conveying is still language, is still arguing, is still conveying a message in a simple enough way so that the other side feels that they are listening to something relevant. So I think perhaps the most important thing that law school gave me, and in Portuguese law school, you go through, I would say, an unholy number of oral exams. So if you want to really become a good student, you have to go through improvement oral exams where you have to present your work in front of a panel. Normally, the old professor is there to listen to you and he will grill you. And I did 40 of those during my 4 years of law school. So 40 of those, it's insane. 40 hours of my life trying to convince the person in front of me that I was not a total fool. And so when I then go and I pitch to a VC capitalist or I pitch to even a client, I am not nervous. I prepare very well. I know what to say. I know how to react to what the client or the VC person is giving me. Then I think lawyers have an advantage vis-a-vis, for example, machine learning engineers, right? They can have the best product, but then maybe you put them in front of an audience and the message is not conveyed very well. Then the second thing that I think really helped was lawyers have a certain way of organizing their minds, which sometimes is terrible and drives other social sciences absolutely nuts, but it's exceptionally relevant for when you're building products and you're managing a team, right? You want certainty in the way that when you are in a board meeting, for example, in your team meeting, you want objectives are these. This is where I want to be. This is what we need to do. This is the deadlines. This is very lawyery kind of reasoning, right? Maybe our social science would be much more mellow in a way that they would orient a certain company. That's not how I built the company. That's not how I manage the company. I manage it almost as in a legal reasoning, right? We need these premises. And if we achieve those premises, this will be the results. Just watch it, believe it. And so those two
Yeah.
things, I think that they make you a good arguing skill plus good organizational skills of a lawyer. That's something that really helps you a lot to do the switch.
Yeah, definitely I agree. I feel like the structure that being brought to you by being a lawyer helps a lot in being also a project manager, let's say, right? Because you're managing a project, you're managing people, and this is one of the key competences that you have to be structured and have deadlines and have reasoning from A to B, etc., and not go all over the place. And I was wondering, was there something like a myth, maybe, that there is about switching careers, or in your case, having two careers in parallel, let's say, that turned out to be false, that is not true? So you thought, okay, it's gonna be, if I'm gonna have this parallel career or other career, it's gonna be this way, but actually it turned out not to be
So
true.
I think there is a general myth from the legal academia side that is the only and most prestigious way of doing scholarship, and that you learn and teach by becoming a professor, and that's the best way to know and then to teach others. And so I was highly incentivized by my peers and even some of my best mentors, right, not to do the switch. And this is part of my personality. I react normally negatively. So when someone tells me you shouldn't do this, I have more urge to do it just to understand why they said it in the first place. And that has happened too. So when I was starting to build a company, people told me, yeah, it's very difficult you're doing teaching outside. People will not like it. People think at some points that you are a traitor because they have given you so much academic knowledge and they have nurtured you to becoming a professor. And now comes this guy and does a startup that also does legal education. And so there was a big myth that some people conveyed to me that I think it's not true at all. I speak to my colleagues. My colleagues do not consider me a traitor. I continue to teach at Catolica. I consider myself to still be a good professor, and I put a lot of effort in the things that I do as a legal scholar. I have just imported quite a lot of the technological side into my teaching. So instead of just showing you the metaverse, that's one of the things I teach, and augmented realities, I actually bring augmented realities into the class and we can study the challenges, good, hardcore legal challenges, the TSA, DMA, GDPR, but from a tech sort of hands-on perspective, right? And I didn't have that for most of my career. I had one or two good scholars that did that too while I was studying. And those guys have come up to me and said, look, this is, I think, the way to also retain attention and teach the new generations. And so it is a myth, I think, and a false one, that you as a legal scholar cannot put one step outside of academia without setting your first foot on fire, or that it is incompatible to have both feet in different places. I might be wrong, right? Maybe my academic career will extinguish in the next couple of months and the startup will fail and this was all a mistake. And that can be, but so far I have not seen the backlash from my colleagues. On the contrary, a lot of colleagues tell me, how can I help you? I would like to try and do something similar. I would like to try. I have ideas outside of academia that I would like to try. Is it really as difficult as they say? So if you believe you have a good idea and in the current space that you're in, working environment that you're in, that's not possible to execute, maybe sometimes you need to get one step out of the door, try that other environment and see, okay, is this compatible? Is it not compatible? Does this make my first environment actually better than before? So far, that's where I've been feeling, Dima. In a couple of years, if we do this podcast again, maybe I'm living on the streets and it was all a mistake. But so far, I'm okay with it.
Hopefully not. Hopefully we not. But we're gonna meet in some more comfortable place. And you already started talking about what would you do if you would be in the career phase where you're stuck. Like a lot of people, they feel stuck. I also been there. I've been lucky to be almost kicked out of the law firm to do other stuff, to start entrepreneurial and investment journey. But if people feel a little bit stuck in their law firm, in consulting, in academia, and they don't see the way out, what would you say to them?
Oh, I think this is the best moment to consider the switch, consider the jump. There's many reasons for that, but the main reason is that all of those professions that you've mentioned are on the first line of targets for whatever we come up with in the next few years that resembles something akin to AGI. So people that work with language, that work with something that can be tokenized easily, and that's consultants and that's lawyers, they will find themselves in a difficult spot in the next years. They will not completely disappear, but there will be for sure not enough market, not enough demands for the offer. And this includes the people that you and I teach at the university, that clearly will not be enough demand from the companies. Because at some point, as a client, you'll go to a law firm, the law firm will say, these brief cost us, I don't know how many hours to make, here's the bill, 200K. They will look at that and they'll say, are you kidding me? I have just prompted Claude here, Claude's 6 or 7 at the time, and Claude gave me the exact same thing and I pay $25 a month subscription. So I'm not paying 200K for your bill. So clearly that fees will go down, and in general, the crazy McKinsey consultancy fees and things like that, they will go down. And that will mean that people will have to be eventually, the workforce will be reduced. At that time, it will be already too late to do the switch, because others would have switched. There will be AI native, there will be AI native lawyers, there will be AI knowledgeable consultants, and it will be very difficult because there will be a competitive market. At this moment, the environment is still freshly new, right? There's a couple of crazy people like you and I that are trying to do something with it, but it is still not saturated. So what you have to think is, okay, if you don't see in your next 10 to 15 years a path, a clear path of growth, if you're in a law firm and you see there is no path to become partner in the next 10 years because people up there, it's just too crowded. Or in your consultants company, and that more and more the clients are asking the projects to be done faster and with lower fees, maybe it is time to be on the other side of the fence and start to understand, why are clients now saying that it is so easy to do my job? And then you're going to start working with the tools. Okay, maybe you will start with the mainstream things. You go to Claude, you go to ChatGPT, you'll go to Perplexity, and you'll start understanding, okay, what does this bring different? And I don't know, Dima, if you agree, maybe 20, 30% of the lawyers I know, maybe even a bit more than that, being conservative, 50% of the lawyers I know are not super happy in the things they're doing with their day-to-day life. And so if you join, not a lot of future perspectives, plus you're really not very happy what you're currently doing, it's time to maybe talk to your partner if you have kids already and say, look, can you back me up for, and this is a point, Dima, I know you have a family as well, and I don't have kids yet, but my family and my wife and all, these people are fundamental in the switch. You have to talk to them and say, I'm going to take this leap of faith. Are we okay with this leap of faith? And if they are on with you in this life and they want to support you, they will say, you know what, let's do it. What's the worst that can happen? You'll go to becoming a lawyer again. There's million, gazillion law firms that they will hire you back. Or maybe you will become something else. You're a qualified lawyer. You will survive at some point, right? Your CV, you will be on top of other CVs with what you've done if you've done 10 years in a law firm. Yeah, I don't know. This always helped me. The advice would be, what's the worst case scenario, really? And if that worst case scenario is not, the destruction of the universe, as you know, maybe jump, maybe try. And then if it doesn't work, okay, you can always go back. What I think.
Yep, I totally agree. I also think that all of us are born to realize the best versions of ourselves. And we're lucky to have something that gives us a clue if we are going the right direction or the wrong direction. That is the feeling that you feel, okay, maybe this is not the best place that I'm working. Okay, maybe I'm not happy with the work. Yes, maybe because you have something to create, fulfill, to make better our world. So that's
But one thing, Dima,
definitely, good signs of
just on that feeling, one thing that I never had before starting a company was I would never wake up on a Saturday morning wanting to work. Never happened in the history of Francisco's professional life. Okay, not even the teaching part. I would never want to wake up on a Saturday morning and, here we go. I really want to prepare this class. I never had that. And I love teaching. Definitely not while I was in the law firm. Definitely not when I was in the policy making side. That wake up on a Saturday, I had some tasks to do, and I would happily wake up. Or, and this sometimes happens with the company, which is ridiculous. I am working very late into the night, and I think, I really would prefer not to go to sleep because I know I need to because it's how human our biological dimension works. But I wish I could just carry on working on this product because I'm having so much fun. And if you don't feel that with your current career, that for me is an indicator that there's something out there that you can do. You don't have to become a skateboarder because you love skateboarding, because maybe that's not sustainable. But you will find an equilibrium point where you're doing something you like and enjoy, and that is also giving you money. That is possible. I think that's the best message we can give your listeners, Dima. It is possible to find that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think this is a great wrap up. Thanks a lot, Francisco. Francisco, thanks for showing us that you can change industries without changing your values. You can do that by pursuing your passion. And sometimes the best way to reform the system is to leave it and build something together with your colleagues, so with your friends, and maybe to build something even better than already exists, and then bring it back. It is also possible. Whether you're switching because of the burnout, curiosity, or just sheer timing, which is quite good, according to Francisco and according to me, I totally agree. It's still a very good time to switch. You're not late, you're just on time. What matters is that you move, that you stay brave, stay curious, and you move forward. If you like the episode of Switchers, please follow along wherever you're getting the podcast, and yeah, keep switching wisely. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
Dima.
everybody.